When I first began interviewing Holocaust survivors 40 years ago, in the 1970s, there were no clear models about what an interview with a survivor was supposed to look like. Now, this was before we had all the video testimony projects. There were earlier accounts collected, but nothing like what began mainly in the 80s and 90s, people sitting 2-3 hours in front of a video camera and so on one time. The advantage of being at a time when there weren't such models is that survivors and I could make it up as we went along. Effectively, we could wing it. And one of the things that we winged was to meet as long and as often as it seemed useful to survivors to do so. Now that could mean several times over a period of weeks, of months, with a few people years, and with a very few people decades. So this is about depth rather than breadth. It's about knowing people well. It's about talking about the war and after the war in the context of full relationships. Now, one of the things that happens when you know people well is that every now and then they will tell or retell an episode, a memory, that they've told you many times before over the course of a long acquaintance about something important, a loss, a transition, illness. But it's as though at these times they come up with an image or a memory they hadn't included before, or maybe just a cadence of voice that nails it, that seems to get to the heart of it. These are very special moments, obviously. They're not typical of survivor testimony. They're not typical of the ways any of us talk about anything. These are unique gifts, really, that happen in the course of conversations, particularly with people we know well. I mention this because Remnants is a collection of those kinds of moments, really a trajectory of those moments from all of these years of interviewing and less formally talking with my friends who are Holocaust survivors. So it makes it a very condensed piece, and it makes it, in certain respects, an unanticipated piece. And I say that because these moments were, in general, not anticipated by me, for sure, and not anticipated by the survivors either, who came to, in most cases, discovered that image, that cadence, that memory in the moment. That's what's represented. And I hope you, watching the video, will also find that what you see and what you hear will be unanticipated by you. That's one of the goals of a piece like this, to get under and around some of our expectations of who survivors are and what they have to retell. Now, just technically, I mentioned that this particular recording was from what was really an experimental time at the University of Michigan Video Studio back in 2013. We were just playing with lighting and sound and so on. We did not expect this to be the video of Remnants, but it turned out there was a quality in one take, the second take, that we wanted to preserve. So this is that one take, and it's minimally edited. The times when I kind of wandered off the frame are gone, and the times when I went into a coughing fit are gone, but otherwise it's as it was. So in that sense, it's simple, it's minimal, it's rough technically in some other ways at times, but hopefully it captures what this piece intends. Thank you.
The voices of Holocaust survivors are themselves survivors. Each must draw on words and cadences that once belonged to entire communities, even while we're telling how those communities were destroyed. And each must persist within a remembered terror that can still consume a voice and sometimes does. Remnants is a gathering of such voices. Voice, a woman. During the war, I lost my voice. I literally lost my voice. I was a little kid at that time, little pisher like we say in Yiddish. I was 8 years old, and at that time I lost my voice. This was in 1943 in the ghetto. It was after one of those actions. You know, when the SS come in and they kill a lot of people. They round up the others and they take them to the train. The train takes them away. After one of those actions, I lost my voice. I don't know why, but for 2 years I did not speak a single word. After the war, my voice came back. Not right away, but very slowly. This was in 1945 in a DP camp for displaced persons, mostly for Jews who had survived the war. During the day in that camp, I did not speak at all. But at night, when I was having a nightmare, I screamed. So that was how he knew I still had a voice, because during the day I was completely mute. During the night I screamed. There was a doctor at that camp, Jewish doctor, who said, if the girl can scream in the night when she's asleep, so she can scream in the day when she's awake. And if she can scream in the day, so she can also sing or cry. She can sing or cry. She can speak words as well. The voice can be salvaged. The screams can be refined into cries, and the cries can be refined into words. So the doctor tried to help me. It took me to run in the hills near that camp. They had me run with my mouth open so I could feel the air push up against my throat. And he told me to try to scream with the air in my throat, or make any sound at all. And soon I did start to scream when I was running, and then I was crying and making other different sounds. And eventually, the sounds became a voice. I could speak words again after 2 years of no words at all. Today, we have many words about the Holocaust. We argue, what does it mean? What should we do? What should we have done at the time? We argue for God and against Him, for Israel and against Israel, for reaching out to others and against reaching out to others. We argue and we reflect and we argue some more. But to me, when I think about the Holocaust, I remember the doctor. And I remember myself when I was a young girl running in the hills. Because to me, all our words, whatever we say about the Holocaust, are just so many different refinements of a cry. And a cry is just barely salvaged from a scream. And the scream is just barely salvaged from the silence. Mars, a man. In the beginning, right after the war, we wanted to talk about it. I mean, if we could talk about it, we wanted to talk about it. We needed to talk about it. I wanted to talk about it a lot, but nobody wanted to hear. Like, when I first came to this country, nobody wanted to hear about the Holocaust. I mean, nobody wanted to hear about it. My own cousin, dentist in California, I met when I first came over here. He said to me almost the first thing he said, Manny, I know what you went through. I saw the newsreels. I don't want to hear a word about it. That's what he said to me. I saw the newsreels. So, funny thing? To me, a funny thing I noticed made me think. Maybe they did see something. This was 1947, 2 years after the war. And I noticed there were reports coming out, the first ones, about unidentified flying objects. This was the beginning of all that with the Martians and the flying saucers. 1947. Suddenly, 1947, all these unidentified flying objects were showing up. Then, just like they say today, some people were saying they saw the people from inside the spaceship. Just like they say today, they said they saw the people who were coming from Mars. And the people they saw had big bald heads, and they had skinny arms and skinny legs, and large eyes. Always the large eyes on those big heads, on those skinny little bodies. Now I said to myself, I've seen these people before. I've seen these people before. I've seen those thin, tiny, skinny bodies. I've seen those bald heads bobbing up and down. I've seen those large eyes. Eyes that were everywhere, staring. Eyes seeing everything. Seeing nothing. Now, I've seen these people before. And my cousin, the dentist in California, he had also seen these people before. He saw them in the newsreels. I saw them on Mars. Burying the cemetery, a man. How do you destroy an entire people? Think about it. It's not an easy thing to do. It is not only killing millions of individuals, though it is certainly that. And it is not only degrading their culture, their way of life, though it is certainly also that. But to destroy a people, you also have to wipe out every trace, the slightest possible trace of their existence. You have to destroy all the evidence, not only that they ever lived, but also that they ever died. Late in the war, in one of the camps I was in, our job was to dig up the corpses of those whom the Germans had killed earlier. This happened in many of the places where they didn't have crematoria. There were mass graves, huge burial trenches all over Poland and Russia and the Baltics. Where people had been shot or gassed or just buried alive. They didn't want to waste bullets. Little children especially were often buried alive. So our job was to dig up the corpses. And the German and Ukrainian guards screamed and beat us while we piled the bodies onto huge pyres. And then they poured gasoline on the bodies and set them on fire. In this camp, even burning the bodies was not the end. They also took the gravestones from the Jewish cemeteries in that area. And many of the stones they had us break up to turn them into gravel, to use to pave the muddy roads. And some were brought in to be stone platforms like workbenches when we were burning the bodies. After the bodies were burned, we had to collect all the ashes and put them on the workbenches, on the gravestones. And if there were any large pieces of bone or even little pieces, the SS made us grind them up. We had other pieces of stone on the gravestones. So we were able to grind all the pieces of bone into a fine gray powder. The chief SS officer had a sieve that he carried, and all the prisoners had to bring him the ashes they had ground up. All the remains of the people had to be able to pass through the sieve. At the end, gravestones that we were using as workbenches were also ground up. And the gravel and the ashes were mixed together with sand and spread around in the soil. And more soil was added over that. The grass seed was laid down. After a few weeks, the grass started coming up. It looked just like any other meadow. There was no sign that anything unusual had ever happened there. And that's how the Germans murdered the murder of my people, and how we buried the cemetery. Missing persons. A woman. Some of the stories we tell, some of the things that happened, even I myself find hard to believe. Like, I have a very good friend. She was in Berlin, just outside Berlin during the war. She was never sent to Auschwitz or any of the other camps. She was just living there on false papers with a false name and false identification. She was not even from there. Her family were German-speaking Jews who lived in Czechoslovakia. So nobody in Berlin knew her. They didn't know she was Jewish. To them, she was just a German girl working in a clothing factory, making uniforms outside Berlin. In Czechoslovakia, she had friends, non-Jewish friends who were helping her parents. And so she was able to find out what was going on. And she heard from these friends that her parents, that her little brother and her sister had been taken to Theresienstadt. Now, Theresienstadt was a camp, but it was not considered as bad. This was because the Germans kept it as a showplace, a camp where they cared for their prisoners. Then, at the end of 1943, they took my friend's family to Auschwitz. She found out because even in Auschwitz, the Czech Jews from Theresienstadt were kept for a while in a special camp. And they were made to write postcards about how well they were being treated there. Friends of her family received one of these postcards. They did not believe what was written. They knew it was a trick. And so did my friend. And in fact, there was no more word from her parents, or her little brother, or her sister. They'd all been taken to the gas. My friend did not know exactly what happened. But she knew that her family was gone. This was already 1944, and almost all the Jews were gone. They were gone from Germany. They were gone from Czechoslovakia. Millions of Jews were gone from Poland. So my friend, she did a crazy thing. She herself does not know why she did it. Maybe it was despair. Maybe she no longer wanted to live. Maybe she really was crazy. And she didn't know what she was doing. But she called the Gestapo headquarters. She just called them up on the telephone. The very people who were taking the Jews away. And when the Gestapo officer answered the phone and asked her what she wanted, she said, she would like to report a missing person. And who is missing? The Gestapo officer asked. And my friend said that her mother was missing. She had been in Theresienstadt, and then she'd been put on a train. Now she was missing. Then my friend said that her father was also missing, and her little sister, her little brother. She gave the Gestapo officer their names, just as though it was normal circumstances. And then she described them for him, so he would know them if he found them. My mother has long, flowing, beautiful red hair and freckles. My father is a strong, handsome man. He's tall. He used to play a lot of soccer. My little brother is 8 years old. He has red hair and freckles like my mother. And my little sister is 6. She is dark and strong like my father. And the Gestapo officer took all the information. Apparently, he was very polite. He promised to call her back if he heard anything about the whereabouts of her family. And how can I get in touch with you? He asked. And my friend told him where she lived. She told him the truth. And she told him where she worked and what she looked like. She told him more than they would ever need if they wanted to find her. But they never did find her. They never called. They never came. She never heard anything from them. Maybe they assumed she was crazy. Maybe they assumed she was already dead. Dolls. A woman. All they did on Kristallnacht was decapitate my dolls. I had a wonderful collection. I was a little girl who loved all her dolls. We were lucky. Somebody warned us they were coming. When we returned to the apartment, the dolls were sitting together, leaning against each other on our dining table, and their heads were all cut off. My husband and I went back to my hometown in November '88, and we had a wonderful time. Truly, it was totally gemütlich. The people couldn't have been nicer. This was for the 50th anniversary of the Kristallnacht. They invited all the Jews from my hometown who had survived. And they had an exhibit called All the Jewish People Around the World, with a big chart that looks just like my son's in our basement. His is called Sea Mammals of the World, all the seals and whales and porpoises and the places where they live. And my hometown had all the Jewish people around the world. The Israeli Jews wore little kibbutz hats, and the Russian Jews had violins, and the American Jews had round and happy faces, and the Argentine Jews wore colorful clothes. And dolls, too. They were selling dolls, too. Jewish people around the world dolls, just like the American Indian dolls we have in this country, in America, all dressed up in native clothes. And a lovely little girl came running up to me. A German girl from my hometown. And she had one of these dolls. A little blonde German Jewish doll. And she put it in my hands, and she said, "This is Elsie, and she's Jewish, and I love her." She put it right in my hands to show me Elsie and how much she loved her. And my husband turned completely pale. I swear to God, he was absolutely white. He knows me well. He reads my mind. But I didn't do anything. I just gave it back. I did nothing at all. I just gave it back. I didn't tear its head off. How to survive a man. Whenever I speak, somebody always asks me, "How did you survive?" That's what they always want to know. How did I survive? What gave me the strength to go on? What gave me the hope to get through? I don't know why they always ask this. Maybe because today, everybody wants to be some kind of survivor. Like I go to the bookstore and I look at the books and they have How to Survive the Loss of a Love and the Survival Manual for Young Parents. Then they have Surviving the Breakup if you're going to get a divorce and the Step Family Survival Guide if you're going to get together. Doesn't matter if you're losing people or you're gaining them. It's survival either way. And everybody wants to be some kind of survivor. No. I was curious. I decided to read one of these survival books. This was Norman Cousins, a Jewish guy. And he wrote The Anatomy of an Illness. Have you read it? It's about how he survived an illness. See, Norman Cousins, he got some kind of bad arthritis. In the meantime, he had a lousy doctor. So he gets another opinion. He finds a doctor who lets him do whatever he wants. So what does he want to do? He takes a lot of vitamin C, he watches a lot of funny movies, and he laughs. And eventually, his arthritis goes away. He says that laughter and jokes give a big boost to the immune system. Now, apparently, the immune system has a sense of humor. Anyway, Norman Cousins, he says, if you want to survive, you should look at the bright side, watch the comedians, and find a doctor who's not a sourpuss. That's how Norman Cousins survived. I'll tell you, though, for me, it was different. What helped me survive? They don't write it in a book. Not in any of the books that I looked at. And I don't think they're going to put it in Reader's Digest either. Because I don't think people really want to read this. Because you see, what helped me survive was not jokes and funny movies and looking at the bright side. No, not at all. What helped me survive was hatred. Pure, undiluted hatred. And the wish for revenge. So when I was in that camp, and I looked at the SS man with the machine gun in the tower, I said to myself, one day, I'm going to be up in that tower. One day, I'm going to have that machine gun. See, this is the power of hatred. The power to stay alive. To stay alive because I looked at that SS son of a bitch. And I said to myself, I'm going to survive you. I'm going to survive you. You will be torn to pieces. And I will go on. And thank God I did. Thank God I did. Shema Yisrael. Thank God I did. The vanity of a woman. Whenever I'm introduced as a survivor, I'm a little bit uncomfortable. I mean, what do people want?
What do they expect? In the beginning, until just the last few years, nobody wanted to hear from us. Everybody said, this is to forget. Life goes on. Hush up your bedrooms. Like, this may sound stupid, but we heard in this country, when you laugh, the whole world laughs with you. And when you cry alone. So that's exactly what we did. We said, we're Americans too, and we are. And we kept our memories to ourselves. Now, today, everybody makes a big deal out of it. I mean, they don't just invite us to speak, but they turn us into some kind of heroes. They talk about the special wisdom we're supposed to have and the precious legacy we're supposed to pass on. And all the tales and legends we're supposed to be able to retell. What is this? A bar mitzvah? A celebration of our Jewish roots? I mean, we, whose roots were totally destroyed, are supposed to have a precious legacy? And we, who can hardly speak at all, are supposed to tell you fabulous tales and legends. In the beginning, people were silent. Today, they are stupid. But I'll tell you, I'm stupid too. I don't have wisdom. I don't even know what I think. I mean, I lived through it. I remember it. But even I don't know what the Holocaust means or what we should believe about it. One memory I'll tell you, because then maybe you will understand this stupidity of mine. You know, I was part of the time in Birkenau. Birkenau. That was the part of Auschwitz where they had the gas chambers in the shower room and the crematoria. Birkenau was where they killed most of the people in Auschwitz. And I was in a group of prisoners who sorted the clothes of those who had already been gassed and burnt. After they went into the shower room, the gas chamber, we came out and packed up the clothes they left behind. And also in Birkenau, there was the prisoner's latrine. You know? Where we went to the toilet, which was really just a bench with a row of holes over a pit filled with quicklime. So this was where we went to the bathroom. And in the latrine of Birkenau, the SS took one lady, one of the prisoners, and they made her the Scheißkappel. This was a joke for the SS. It means the shit commander. That was her title. It was on a sign she wore around her neck. And her job was to watch the toilets and be like a kind of attendant. She had to keep it neat and clean. One day I noticed this lady, Scheißkappel, had managed to find a few boxes. Somehow she got a couple of old crates made of wood, and she put them together with the little one in front so she could sit on it. And she also had a little mirror that she probably found in her clothes from one of the prisoners who'd been killed. So with the boxes and the mirror, she made like a little mural. She put the mirror over the big box, and she sat on the little box and made like a little vanity.
in the corner of the latrine, a little vanity in the corner of the ladies' room. Whenever people ask me, what does the Holocaust mean? Or I ask myself, what does it mean? I think about this memory. It's not easy to do. Try to keep the picture, all the elements of the picture, together in your mind at one time. A vanity in the latrine in Auschwitz-Birkenau. Now you tell me because I don't know myself. Does it inspire your hope or your revulsion? That the attendant in the toilets of hell made a place to put on her makeup.